Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Expert to Authority show. My name is Simone Vincenzi. I'm your host, and this is the show for coaches, speakers, and trainers who want to grow their businesses while making an impact in the world. A couple of things before we start. If you haven't subscribed to the show, make sure you subscribe and also check out the resources in the show notes because we have a great tool to help you create a high converting webinar presentation in less than 3 hours. It's called the Webinar Conversion Kit. So check it out. It is in the show notes. Now, today we are going to talk about overcoming adversity. And, in life, we always sometimes get thrown a curveball. And how do we react to it? How can we thrive in the face of adversity? And in fact, my guest today is a seasoned marketer with over 20 years leading teams for some of the UK's largest organization. She's a mother to 3 young children, and she's one of the fewer than 300 women to have rowed an ocean. She's also a cancer survivor. Please welcome mother, marketer, mariner, motivator, Felicity Ashley. Welcome to the show, Felicity. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. We connected through a networking event, and I heard you in the breakout room sharing your story, and I said, okay, that's a perfect fit for the show because you didn't just row through adversity metaphorically, but physically as well. So I would love to understand what in your mind happened to say, I want to row an ocean. Right, let's row an ocean. I don't know what to do this Sunday morning. Let's go and row an ocean. I'm sure that's not how it happened. So fill the gaps, please.
No, I mean, some people might call it a midlife crisis, but there was quite a backstory to it, really. My brother-in-law rode the Atlantic 2 years before I rode the Atlantic. And I remember him telling me he was going to do this thing. And I thought, he's absolutely mad. I thought, why would you want to put yourself in a tiny boat in the massive waves? I just thought this ridiculous thing to do. Didn't think about it much more until the time of his race actually came. And then I followed him closely on social media. And I just remember watching him finish live on Facebook and sitting in my bed at 2 a.m. with watching him on my iPad. And at that point, it planted a seed because it was so exciting. It was literally spine-tinglingly exciting watching him. And I just thought to myself, if I feel like that thousands of miles away, what must it be like to actually be in that boat finishing the race? And at that point, I knew I wanted to do it. But in my head, I thought, well, it's not the right time. The children are too young. I couldn't do it now. So I was sort of starting to formulate some kind of way off plan. But then my sister gave me a call about a week later saying, I've got a boat. Do you want to do it? And about 5 minutes later, I called her back and said, yes, I'm in.
It's a family thing.
It's a family thing. Yeah.
It's a family thing. Were you rowing before? Just tell me that at least you were rowing before.
Yes, but I hadn't rowed for, I don't know, at least 20 years. I rowed at school. My sister and I both rowed at school, and the other two women in the crew had also rowed to a slightly higher standard at university as well. So we did have a rowing background, but that's by no means a prerequisite to do the race. Most people probably have never rowed, but it does help because you understand the technique of rowing and how to row for that length of time without injuring yourself.
Was there a moment where you were that close to giving up while you were doing it? To say,
No, I don't think so.
no?
No. The problem is that once you're in the race and doing it, you can't give up because the only way to get to the other side is to row to the other side. So yeah, there's no turning back once you set off. There were probably moments during the training because we trained for about nearly 2 years. And we faced all sorts of challenges and obstacles during that time. And there were probably moments when we thought, are we ever actually going to get to the start line? But at no point did I feel like giving up.
That's you said that some of the toughest moments sometimes were during the training. Whether you can pick one, whether it's in the training or the race, what was the toughest moment that you had to face through this process?
I think probably the toughest moment from a mental perspective was in the 10 days, 2 weeks before the dates of the race start, when we were in the Canary Islands doing our final preparations to go. And on the flight on the way over, one of our crew started feeling unwell. This was tail end of 2021. And when we got there, I remember sitting on a bench with her, waiting for a taxi to take us to our apartment. And she said, I can't smell anything. And I'm feeling pretty awful, and I can't taste anything. And at that point, I shifted along the bench a bit more, and we got to our apartment, set off to find a pharmacy. We left Jo in the apartment. We set off to find a pharmacy, got some COVID tests, and sure enough, she tested positive. And it was at the time when everyone had to isolate with a positive test. So from that moment on, Jo was locked in her room in the apartment, and we isolated for a couple of days. But then we had to do daily COVID tests, and there was such a high possibility, having travelled over from the UK with her, that one of us would, or one or more of us would also test positive. And I think that was the toughest time, knowing that we were ready to go, knowing that we trained for the best part of 2 years for this incredible experience, but also knowing that it was now entirely out of our hands. And if one of us tested positive, then we would either have to make the decision not to go at all, or we'd have to make the decision to go as a 3 and leave one person behind. And that was just almost too horrible to contemplate, because it would have been, it was just awful thinking about which one of us it might be. And every morning you'd wake up swallowing, imagining that you might have some kind of sore throat, and just, hoping and praying that each day those COVID tests would be negative. And by some miracle, they were, and we all made it to the start line.
What did you learn about life from this experience?
I suppose it was, it might be a cliche, but it's control the controllables. There was, at that point, absolutely nothing we could do. We just had to hope for the best and carry on preparing under the assumption that we were all going to get off the start line and do the race. So we had to keep going and get up every day and do the things we needed to do to get ourselves ready and to get the boat ready, and just keep our fingers crossed, basically, that we wouldn't have to pull out for some, for a reason that was absolutely outside of our control at that point. So it really was control the controllables and put your faith in some kind of higher order that, that you'll be able to do it.
Like, please,
yeah,
make sure this happens. Yeah. But isn't that true about life in general? Is we control the controllable. I'm thinking about our viewers and listeners right now, that maybe they are facing a tough time, or they are really working towards a specific goal, and they've been putting their blood, sweat, and tears, and their time, and their hope, and their aspirations, their money. I mean, running a business in itself, there is so many things that are outside your control, that all you can do is control the controllable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the other element of it was to almost laugh at our adversity. There was nothing we could do. So the best thing we could do was enjoy it and, poke some fun at ourselves. So we'd sit around the table, all doing our COVID tests together, just having a laugh, because there was nothing else we could do about it. We could either sit there in the doldrums being miserable, or we could have some fun at the same time.
There's a lot of wisdom in this. I remember I was listening, someone who I listen to quite often. It just helps me, it calms me down, and it gives me some perspective, is Sadhguru, which is an Indian guru that became really famous and popular, in particular through social media and YouTube. But I love some of the messages. Like, listen, life is just going to happen anyway. How do you want to experience it? Do you want to be miserable? Do you want to be happy? That's your choice. Things are going to happen no matter what. How do you want to experience what you want your experience to be? You want to be miserable? Be my guest. You want to be happy? Then work on your happiness and finding whatever joy you can in all the different challenges. Of course, this is a big generalization, because depending on what happens on a personal level, family level, business level, there are layers to this conversation. But at the same time, it's a great reminder about finding joy in what you're doing, finding joy in the adversity, finding happiness and laughter, no matter what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, you always have a choice. You wake up in the morning and you have a choice about how you approach the day ahead. And some days it might be a little more difficult than others to put on a happy face and to be positive about it. But there's always something to, be grateful for or to be happy about. And I think you just need to look for those things.
Exactly. And I know one of your big messages is how ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And I don't want to go into the how of this. That's not what I want to talk about. But I want to understand, why do you think ordinary people don't do extraordinary things? What's stopping them?
I think it's a combination of pressures and expectations of society around them. So, the narrative that middle-aged women, for example, in our case, well, middle-aged women, middle-aged mums don't go and row an ocean and leave their kids for 2 months. That's certainly a pressure that we all felt. And I think for maybe some weaker willed people, it might have put them off entirely. But I think part of it is also our own limiting beliefs about what we can do. And those things are probably influenced by society as well. So I remember when my sister asked me about doing the row, and my immediate reaction was, I can't possibly do it. I've just had a hip replacement. The kids are too young. I can't leave them for that long. And when I put the phone down, I realized it was only me putting those negatives in my head. Nobody around me was going to say those things. And I thought about whether, if my husband asked if he could go and do something similar. So if the shoe was on the other foot, I wouldn't have hesitated to say, yeah, of course, go and do it. And that made me change my perspective on it and change my viewpoint, and make me realize that the only person standing in the way of me doing this thing was me. And it was that total mindset shift. So I think it is a combination of the pressures of society and the expectations of society about what you can and can't do, and then your own beliefs as well.
How can you deal with the expectation and pressures of society? Because they can be heavy. Thinking about your background, your history, your family. And that's given that you have a supportive environment around you. If you have an environment that makes you feel small around you, that's even more challenging. So how would you deal with the external expectation? Let's start with those.
I think I suppose partly it's about your mindset and being almost hell bent on doing this thing, and filling yourself with your own self-belief that you can do it. And then it's about surrounding yourself with people and influences that have this, have a similar viewpoint. So it's about almost brushing off the naysayers and looking for the people that are going to encourage and support you along the way. And that's, possibly easier said than done, but at some point you need to put a bit of a shield up and be a bit guarded with the people who are going to bring the negative emotions and bring you down, and look for the people that are going to help carry you along on that journey. And certainly if I think about the row, once we were in the mindset that we were going to do it, naturally we surrounded ourselves with like-minded people. So the other members of the crew, other rowers that had done it in the past, the race organisers. And suddenly we felt like we were in this bubble of people that do these things day in, day out. And it all made it seem so much more achievable. And that kind of feeling then is very infectious, and it helps you combat some of those negative feelings that you might get from different perspectives and different people.
And that's why representation and access is so important.
Yeah.
I remember, I was thinking, it was maybe 12 years ago. It was one of the first business trainings that I went to. I was 23 at the time, something like that. And it was one of my first very ever business training. And one of the lessons there was environment is greater than willpower. The environment around you is way greater than any willpower that any person would have. There are very few people in the world that have a willpower so strong to bend every environment around us.
Yeah.
There are, but they're rare.
Yeah.
And they are the movers and they are the shakers. But for a lot of people, the key is literally putting yourself in an environment where whatever sounds crazy to others around you, it actually is the norm.
Yeah.
And I remember I wrote my first book when I was 23. That's when I wrote my first book. If someone thinks about writing a book at 23 and when you're just starting your business, in particular in an era which was very different from right now, about like 12 years ago, it was very different, the world. And in particular, the world in business, without social media, without all these examples that we had, I was just surrounded by people that were in their 50s or 60s. So they had a book. And I felt that it was the one without it. I didn't even think about the age gap, but I was in an environment where having a book was normal. So for me, writing a book at 23 was absolutely normal. And that's why the environment is greater than will. Now
Yeah.
let's move the conversation to the internal battle though, because one we said is the external, which is also linked to how you face things internally. But how about your mindset? How can you go about it? What shift can you make?
I think it's about reframing. Certainly for me, it was about reframing. So my words to my sister was, well, I can't possibly do that. And it was about, how do you change those can'ts into cans, or the reasons, for me not being able to doing it. I've just had a hip replacement, the kids are too young. That they can be excuses, or you can see them as reasons for doing it. So I was using them initially as excuses for not being able to do it. But flip it on its head, and having just had a hip replacement, my new hip had given me a completely new lease of life. I was able to exercise without pain, which I hadn't been able to do for several years. And there was no physiological reason why I couldn't do this thing. So suddenly, hip replacement became my can and not my can't. So it's that really powerful shift in perspective, and the power of reframing challenges as opportunities, I suppose. And equally, I can't leave the kids. Well, that was only my view, but actually I've got a husband who's equally as capable as I am of looking after our 3 children. And what a brilliant opportunity for them to see me doing it. What a brilliant example to set for them. And that was one of our biggest motivations, really, was to inspire our children to dream big and to show them that, ordinary people really can do extraordinary things if you have the right support network around you, and if you've got, the right mindset, and you put a lot of hard work in. So originally, having seen those things as challenges, I was able to turn them on their head and see them as the big opportunities, and actually the reasons that I was able to say yes and commit to it. I think,
Yeah, keep going, please.
well, I think that's so powerful. And sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to change challenges into opportunities. But generally speaking, there's a way of doing it. Or you look for other opportunities or other reasons that you can do something rather than that you can't do something. There'll always be something that you can latch onto, I think.
Talking about challenges, because you mentioned turning challenges into opportunities. This becomes a great key for everyone watching or listening. I'll invite you to think about your own challenges. I'll do it as soon as I finish as well also this interview, and see, okay, what challenges am I having that I can turn into opportunities, where I'm telling myself a different story, what I could change this story. I think we all have at any point in our lives or in our business, if we're running a business, those challenges that can be turned into opportunities. So I really invite you, to everyone watching and listening, to think about that. I want to move and transition to another aspect of your life, which is linked to turning challenges. I don't know if you turn into an opportunity or not, but you mentioned that you're a cancer survivor.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about how you faced this cancer journey as well, and did you have the same mindset that you used with rowing? It was different, it was before, after? Tell me a bit more about that period of your life.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with stage 3 bowel cancer about 3 months after completing the Atlantic row. So I was literally fitter and stronger than I'd ever been in my life, and yet at the same time I had cancer. When I was diagnosed, I was told that it had likely been growing for many, many months, probably even over a year. So I'd trained through the cancer, and I completed the Atlantic row while having cancer. And of course, it was a massive shock to me. It seemed to me like I was the most unlikely person, on the planet to be diagnosed. But I quickly, rather than thinking, well, why me? My mindset was, well, why not me? Because I'm young, fit and strong, young in relative terms, in terms of cancer, I'm probably better placed than most people, in the universe to tackle it. And so I absolutely took that mindset that got me through the row and applied it to this very different but equally life-changing challenge. I knew that I was physically and mentally resilient because I'd proven that through the Atlantic row. And so I just applied that to the cancer challenge. And I think the two elements of my sort of physical resilience and then my mental resilience were my two kind of superpowers for dealing with it, because I was physically fit and strong, which meant that I was able to kind of recover quickly from fairly invasive surgery. And then I was able to withstand the effects of the chemotherapy afterwards. And I was able to carry on exercising throughout, which I think really helped me, not only from a physical fitness perspective, but I also felt that if I can still move and still exercise, then I'm going to be okay. So it's kind of made me feel psychologically better as well. And then with something like the Atlantic Row, mental resilience is probably equally, if not more important than your physical resilience. And so being able to take that same kind of willpower and mental strength and tackle the cancer, the challenge of cancer, was also so powerful. And it was thinking about, reasons that I needed to get through and looking at the light at the end of the tunnel, not the, immediate horror of what I was going through at the time. So for me, my motivation was really, my children, in a huge way. There was no way I wanted them to grow up without a mum, and I wanted to see them grow up and have their own amazing adventures. So that was something that really kept me going, knowing that I needed to get through it for them, really.
There are a few lessons here. One is that you just mentioned right now, having a strong reason why.
Yeah.
Like you had a strong reason why you wanted to live. You had a strong reason why you wanted to move forward. You had a strong reason why you're not to give up. And that, I'm sure, helped you to do whatever it was needed for you to get back on track. And of course, on top of that, you had the experience that you just had, plus the mental resilience, plus your attitude that you have. I'm wondering did you face when you got the news, was that, because this is coming from one of the probably the highest moments in your life, when you just like row on the other side of the you rode the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, you're there, and now you get the news. How did you take it? Was it an emotional roller coaster? Was it pretty okay?
It was definitely an emotional roller coaster. I mean, I'm sure I was in shock for a period of time, but minutes after I was told that I had a tumor, a senior consultant came into the room and she said, "Look, just tackle this like you've tackled the cancer." And that really helped put me on the right track as well, because I thought she's so right. And then it was actually, I was diagnosed the day that we had the award ceremony for the Row. And I had my toenails painted because I was due to go into London that evening for a black tie, party. And the nurse looking after me said, "Oh, your nails look nice. Is that for a special occasion?" And I said, "Well, I was supposed to be going to this event tonight to celebrate the Row, but I suppose I won't go now." And she said, "Well, why not? Nothing's changed since this morning. You could have had this appointment next week and nothing would have changed. So go." And again, I thought, she's absolutely right. Nothing has changed. Cancer may well take lots of things away from me at some point in the future, but there's no reason why it needs to take this experience away from me right now. So I did. I got myself ready, got myself, in my glad rags, and off I went. And I think, again, that really helped me see that it doesn't have to stop you doing things. It doesn't have to necessarily get in the way of you living your life still. Yes, there's going to be challenges, and yes, it's at points in time there will be things you can't do because of it, but it doesn't mean you have to say no to everything. And I think that was a really good way of approaching it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you cannot write the script better, to be honest. If you're thinking about a script of life, this the day where you were supposed to go to the award ceremony, that's where you found out that you had cancer. That's, I mean, if there is a script writer, they, they were very creative there. They were definitely very creative in that moment. You kind of scripted in a different way. I'm curious about asking for help and leaning in, right? Because when you're facing difficulties and challenges, big part of it is we talked about having the right environment, but also asking for support. Before we talk about that, I would love to know from you, are you good at asking for support or not?
I'm getting better, I would say. I learned a few lessons about knowing when the right time to ask for help is. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for just figuring it out for yourself, using your initiative and having a go. But equally, you need to know when that's not the right approach to take, and when you need to kind of get some kind of experts or support in to help you along the way. Yeah.
Because Yeah, talking about when to get the right time. I found personally now in these societies that being self-made is celebrated.
Yes.
I don't need anyone. I made it is celebrated. While actually, according to human nature, we are a collaborative species. Actually, we thrive in collaboration. We thrive when we support each other. And sometimes that is can feel almost like if I ask for support, it means that I'm not good enough. It means that I don't have my pardon the French, my shit together. While
Yeah.
the reality is, actually, we all need that extra support. So you said that you got some lessons
Yeah.
about when to ask, when is the right time to ask for support. Let's talk through one of those.
Yeah. So I'll use the example of the row again. And you asked whether we were rowers before, and because we'd all rowed before, we thought we could just jump in the boat for our maiden voyage and give it a go. We didn't really think too hard about it because we thought, well, we've got this. So that's what we did. I remember one October morning, we recently taken possession of the new boat, and we launched it in on a river in Essex, and we thought we were doing really well, but we'd never even towed anything with a car before, let alone a long boat. And then we had to reverse the boat down a slippery slipway into the river, and we nearly ended up launching the car along with it. We had no idea of the differences between ocean rowing and river rowing. So, for example, anyone listening who or watching who has rowed before will know in river rowing you do what's called feathering your oars. So you turn the oars every stroke. In ocean rowing, you don't do that. And after a couple of hours on the water, our hands were torn to shreds. And we thought, how are we going to manage 40 plus days of this? We're just not going to be able to do it. Our wrists aren't going to be able to handle it. And it was only afterwards that my brother-in-law said, well, you don't feather. And no, we didn't know that. Nobody had told us that because we hadn't asked anybody. And on that first outing, we just had no idea what equipment we needed. So the golden rule of ocean rowing is that you always have to have safety harnesses and you have to be physically attached to the boat at all times. Well, we didn't even have such things. We didn't have a radio on the boat. We didn't know what a centerboard was, let alone our boat had one or how to use it. So there are all these things. In retrospect, we were absolutely clueless. But because we'd rowed before, we just thought we could give it a go. And with the benefit of hindsight, we should have asked for help a lot sooner. We probably weren't safe being out on the river that day, but we were pretty pleased with ourselves because it was a lovely sunny October day and we miraculously made it back in one piece. And I think that was a massive lesson that, giving it a go is all well and good in some circumstances. But when you're taking on something as inherently risky as ocean rowing, you need to know what you're doing, and to know what you're doing, you need to ask for help from people who understand it a lot more than you. So from then on, we surrounded ourselves with our own kind of team of experts who would provide us with support, advice, and guidance in every different area of ocean rowing, whether it was through the technique, how the boat worked, through weather patterns. We had a chap who helped us understand water makers so that we knew how to fix a water maker mid-Atlantic, all sorts of people. And we surrounded ourselves with our own kind of support crew who made sure that we were ready and safe and had a fighting chance of making it to Antigua. So yeah, lots of lessons learned there about who to ask for help, but importantly, when to ask for help.
It is. It reminds me of another business lesson because I'm always reflecting about business in this case. Um, Business lesson is that the most, I think, is like the most expensive um, lessons is not the one or the things that you know, but what you should know that you don't know.
Yeah.
And most of the time, is that because in any industry there are nuances. There are nuances, and I can relate this to the world of webinars. Now, when there are nuances to webinars, and that's why I keep banging on about webinars done well, they really work. But most people don't know what are the nuances, and they think they know, and they say, no, but I done a webinar here. It's like, no, well, you missed this and that part, and this could be different, and this email was be different, because then I can see. And also when I hire an expert for my business, when I'm scaling now, they're thinking, oh, you don't know this part, and you haven't done this part yet, and this compliance here is missing, and I just don't know what I don't know. And that's where leaning in for help really can save you a lot of time, a lot of money, definitely a lot of blisters in that situation. All right. I would love to wrap up the conversation. So first of all, I would love to know what's next for you. So what are you working on at the moment? What are you focusing on? What's next for you, Felicity?
So I'm focusing on building my own business now as a speaker. So with my bringing together my corporate background, so 25 years of working in kind of senior leadership roles in the marketing world for various corporates, and bringing that background together with my more recent kind of lived experiences and applying the lessons that I've learned to some business challenges. So working to help organizations, teams, leaders, with their challenges, whether it's overcoming adversity or becoming more resilient, or how they form better working teams and more effective teams. And also touching on the wellbeing angle as well, because that's been so important for me, both in terms of getting fit enough to do the row, but then, getting through the cancer as well. So I've recently set myself up as a professional speaker to help organizations using my fairly unique story and my expertise in my previous life in the business world.
And if people want to get in touch, what is the best way? What is the best way to reach out to you and find information about you, your business, your speaking? Where can we direct people?
The best way is either connecting on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Felicity Ashley on LinkedIn, or through my website, which is felicityashley.com. I'd love to speak to anyone who's interested in hearing more.
All right, felicityashley.com or a LinkedIn profile. You can check the show notes or the description, for example, if you're watching this on YouTube. And then all the links, the LinkedIn account and also the website, felicityashley.com is there. Felicity, has any final words to wrap up the conversation, to summarize the conversation that we had today?
I think it's just, if you've got a dream, then go for it. Don't let yourself be put off by any limiting beliefs that you yourself hold, or anything that anyone else says to you. Just go for it.
If you have a dream, go for it. Everyone, Felicity Ashley. Thank you very much, Felicity, for joining and being part of the show.
Thank you very much.
All right, people. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Again, a couple more things. If you have not subscribed, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any other incredible episode. Make sure you leave a review. 5-star possibly is good for the guest, it's good for the show, and it's good for my ego. So I'll look forward to seeing that 5-star review. And if you haven't checked the webinar conversion kit as well, in the show notes while you're searching for Felicity's website, have a look at it to help you create a high converting webinar. Until next time, remember that together we grow exponentially. Ciao.